good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever it is, wherever you may happen to be. Welcome to Captain Fawcett's HQ. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about razors, the history of razors. We are talking to you live here from Captain Fawcett's museum, the Marvellous Barbershop Museum, which you must come and have a look for yourself. I'll be gladly show you around. But in the meantime, we have a huge collection here of razors and all shaving, memorabilia and ephemera, etc., etc. But shaving is something that, the passion that I have for this collection is because it doesn't matter who you are. At some point, you've had a shave and or a haircut. And the only difference between the apparatus, really, it's a cutting edge, isn't it? Let's face it, is the quality of the merchandise. There's very little difference beyond that. But the differences, having said that, are huge. You can have something like a little Bic disposable razor worth pennies, or you can have something you can't even buy or sell now, something in ivory. And there's lots of this stuff left. It's still available if you really kind of look around. From the very early safety type razors, here, the ones that came in those beautiful little tins. This dates from around about 1887. And it's remarkable how it's actually kind of lasted. And then, of course, we're moving through into the more modern, disposable blade kind of thing. Gillette brought that out in about 1901, 1903 or something like this. We can talk about razors, cutthroat razors. We'll go and have a look at some. Now, the thing is, have a look at these cases. If you ever find some of these cardboard cases, quite often you'll see a name there. People say, in Britain, they stopped really doing shaves at barbershops, kind of 80s, the period of AIDS and stuff. People were worried about, being anything that might draw a little bit of blood. But people always had their own razors. You would go to your barbershop, and a bit like going to an old-fashioned British pub that would have your tankard, they'd know what you wanted to drink and pull your tankard down. In the same way, you would go to your barbershop, and he would pull down your cup and your razor, and invariably you'd bought the razor from the barber anyway, and he would just looked after it until he would say at some point, Mr. Finney, you need to buy another razor. He would keep it in good condition and hone it, etc., etc. So quite often you will see somebody's name written there. Some of these boxes we have in our collection go back to the 17th century. They're beautiful. They're collectible in their own right. Quite often the blades will have perished because they were steel. Stainless steel didn't exist. Far better, far easier to get a really good edge on one of those. And if they weren't really looked after, they corrode. And we've all seen hundreds of ones that are in very, very poor condition. But as I said, what excites me is the history. And the oldest razor we have in our collection dates back to around about 1650. This cabinet here houses the most valuable, priceless, really, items. I said the oldest razor we have here dates from about 1650. It still has an edge on it, and it has Cutler's poetry. I can't read it all, but it's got beautiful work, little bit of work there with leaves and things. It's just absolutely stunning. 1650, that's nearly 400 years old. Still got an edge. This was found actually in the back of a cabinet behind a drawer, along with some other keepsakes. So it had been stored there for years in this cupboard behind with some bits and bobs. How it survived, who really knows? The difference between these blades, really, here we've got something that's comparatively primitive, very old nonetheless, but this is horn, and it's even held together, bound together, I suppose you should say, with a bit of twine, waxed twine. But then, as I said, the really, really special stuff. We've got stuff here that's in ivory, in tortoiseshell, in pressed horn, in mother of pearl. It's limited really by all your imagination. We've got ones here, a double butterfly one. These were reputedly made by a Napoleonic prisoner of war and then sold to the guards. Whilst on the subject of prisoners of war, because it's always nice to have a little bit of history, because many of these owners who they were, what they did for a living, whether they were happy or whatever, is lost. It's lost in the mists of time. But occasionally you get something which will qualify, something that gives it a bit of whatever, I can't remember what the name is, but a bit of, what's that word we're looking for? But it gives a bit of, story to the whole thing. So here we have here, beautiful. Got a razor here. It's actually got Changi, Changi, which many of you will know is the name of the airport in Singapore. And here, provenance. That was the word I'm looking for, provenance. Here, one here says Ray Tulipan, and on the back, concert party. These are quite cheaply made, quite crudely made, but they came with this letter. And this letter was addressed to a barber in Romford. He's probably long gone now, and it's from a man, sent from a man. And the accompanying letter tells us so much. The very crude razor was made from material found on a rubbish heap in Changi, prisoner of war camp in Singapore. It was given to me by Ray Tulipan, the maker, and it was his first attempt. He assured me that he used this razor for many months. Later, he was able to make passable copies of well-known makes and barter them within the prisoner of war camp for food and various other favours. And he bartered them with the guards, the local Chinese guards. He met him, this man here, Mr. Bates from Potter Heigham, met Ray Tulipan on a ship. I met him in the ship's hospital when I was sick, and he gave these razors to me when he learned I was the ship's barber. My ship was the first troop ship to enter Singapore after the atom bomb was dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The leather, it goes on, I can't remember how I came by the clippers. The engraving, the very crude engraving on the razor, was done by coating the metal with a bit of candle grease and then scratching into the metal, scratching in the design. Then you soaked it, you soaked it in a kind of corrosive ointment of some kind. It says here, you may well ask, how did Ray Tulipan manage to do all this and get the tools, etc. But he's since been told that by ex-POWs that Changi was the Butlins of Eastern prisoner of war camps. I'm sure if anybody spent any time in the Japanese prisoner of war camp in Singapore, they would actually disagree. But that's what I'm saying, it's just so interesting to have this provenance which tells you a little bit about it. Now, many of you will have come across in your life these 7-day sets. This one is absolutely beautiful. Many of them are actually got the days of the week along the back. This one, interesting, these are actually numbered 1 to 7. But what's really interesting about these, it says the Royal Automobile Club. Now that's not the RAC as we know it now, when you break down as a kind of a more expensive option to green flag. This is the Royal Automobile Club in Pall Mall, which is a very exclusive club. Heyday of the clubs, of course, was around about the end of the 19th century. But they had their own barbershop, and this is actually made by a company in Old Bond Street. So the 7-day set, so I'd date this, maybe 1910, alligator case. Something like this you might pay possibly £500 for. As I said, we've got all these different varieties and things. Here's this dates. This set here with the ivory handle, which you actually interchange. Now this, you can see the days of the week engraved into the spine of the blade. And these just clip in. It's very, very clever system how it works. Actually clips in here, and that gives you, just beautiful. That dates from around about 1790, and as you can see, they're not corroded or tarnished in any way whatsoever. So these really are quite family heirlooms, just absolutely beautiful. Again, we were talking about the papier-mâché case. Here's one with a coat of arms on, which may well have been the manufacturer. And here we've got marbled on the inside, and we've spoken about people's names being there. This has just got a P, which would have referred to the owner. I can just show you some of these things further to our conversation. So we've spoken about ivory. This one dates, again, 1820, 1810, 1820, something like this. pressed horn. These were very popular in the States, and they'd have various well-known either political figures. I think this one's got George III and Napoleon on it, so it immediately dates that. That's again about 1814. Mother of pearl. I mean, these things weren't available to the everyman, but it served precisely the same purpose. Mother of pearl, absolutely stunning. I mean, just look at these. Just look, it's absolutely exquisite. Again, ivory with silver little plate in there, and the state of that razor. You can see how, if you're not careful, how they will rust, but the best thing you can do is get them honed and then just put a little bit of Vaseline or machine oil on there just to protect them. But I mean, how has that lasted since 1720? That is over 300 years old. And it's just beautiful, just beautifully balanced and made. Here, horn, could be an antler or something like this. It's actually got someone's name there. John Eames, 1841. That's 180 years old. Stunning, absolutely stunning. Beautiful, works of art in themselves. Genuine tortoiseshell, and again using bone. Looks to me like bone from the grain. The maker, Biggs of Stratford. Absolutely wonderful. And these things are priceless. You know, you just couldn't make these things now. And the craftsmanship, not only is gone. I mean, there's some wonderful cutlers and some wonderful knife makers out there, but they just wouldn't have access to this materials. So it's just really a sample of the collection. Even this bleeding bowl. This is actually German. And again, it's dated 1866. So if you'd ever have the opportunity, come along to Captain Fawcett, have a look. I mean, if this is something of interest, or you've got something old at home and you want to date it, there are a number of quite learned books and tomes. You've got the safety razor compendium book. Who ever thought there'd be so much to do with these? Are safety razors, so they're all post 1880s. Or you can look at these ones again, or straight razors. There's a wonderful guy who's an expert, a guy called Renzo Giardella. I believe he lives somewhere in southern England, near Camberley or somewhere. And he's just written a whole book. And many of the examples that are in this book, we have either similar ones or you know, examples of, I should say, here. Here's the one here I was talking about. So look at these. That's the first razor I showed you, the one dating from 1650. He's talking about the cutler's poetry. He's dating this 1660 to 1690. But look at the terrible condition they're in compared to the one example that we found in the back of a drawer in a cupboard. And these were actually salvaged from the River Thames. But an example of the poetry here says, my edge is good, please you to try, you'll find I'll be the very best. And then another one says, bear me not to foe nor friend. Anyway, that's just a sample, as I said. Captain Fawcett's razors. Do come along and have a look. Have a cup of tea. I look forward to meeting you in due course. I thank you.